Sesame Street lost media has been an incredibly popular topic online for the last several decades now. And why wouldn't it be? Sesame Street has been on for over 55 years, viewed by millions across generations. Of course, there are going to be some pieces of media that slip through the cracks. See what I did there? Only vaguely remembered by people who could have sworn they saw these things at some point in their childhood. Some pieces of Sesame Street lost media have even gone on to become some of the most popular cases in the lost media community, reaching mainstream popularity and interest, like the Crackmaster and, of course, the infamous episode 847, both of which have now been found. But today, I want to focus on a piece of Sesame Street lost media that's still lost. An obscure 1975 PBS TV special hosted by British comedian Jean Marsh and our furry old pal Grover. Hello everybody and welcome back to Muptown Funk. I'm your host Ty, as always, and for the first time ever on this channel, we are going to be diving deep into the world of Sesame Street lost media. Ever since I started this channel almost 3 years ago now, one of the most frequently requested video topics I've had from you guys is lost media, and today I am super excited to cover it, so let's get started. The Jean Marsh Grover Monster cartoon special was a 1-hour special that aired on PBS in early 1975. A collaborative effort between the Electric Company and Sesame Street. Much like another lost Sesame Street special from around the time, Out to Lunch, this served as a fundraiser for PBS, as many PBS programs do. The special was hosted by actress Jean Marsh and Grover, who introduced a collection of the best animated segments from both Sesame Street and the Electric Company, with Marsh and Grover simply appearing in wraparound segments. A pretty interesting and unique concept, but I think it's pretty cool to do a special focused on the animated segments of Sesame Street, and also Electric Company, of course. Though personally, I prefer their Spider-Man segments. Can we get that clip of the wall again?
Here's one wall you'll never crawl, you red and blue buffoon!
I'll never stop showing that in my videos, that's the best. Since this special is completely lost, nearly all the information out there we have on it comes from newspaper articles and promotional images from the time. All of this print media was recently collected and analyzed by blogger Angus Kidman in an incredibly comprehensive article written just last year. This video would not be possible without that. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It is very well made. If you go to sources like the Muppet Wiki, Lost Media Wiki, or Kidman's article, the main image you're going to see is this print ad featuring a promo image of Grover and Jean Marsh. Hey look, that's the picture in the thumbnail of this video. The ad reads, "The Grover Monster Jean Marsh cartoon special is a delightful Festival 75 presentation in which Jean and her Muppet friend feature the best animation from Sesame Street and the Electric Company. It'll be seen blank at blank on channel blank over PBS." And now when I first saw those blanks, I was like, oh great, I'm screwed, I don't even have a date this aired. But the reason why these blanks are in this print ad was because PBS has a different station number depending on the region. So blanks were left in print ads like this so that they could be filled in with relevant information for your area. Oh, PBS is on this channel at this time because you live here. It's that simple. Just so happens that the image that's widely circulated around online is one that hasn't been filled in. Thanks to Kidman, who compiled a bunch of newspapers and articles going over TV listings from the time, we have a list of every known airing of this special, with the first one being on March 2nd, 1975, on PBS Channel 50 in Montclair, New Jersey. Most stations aired the special just once, or maybe twice, in March of 1975. With some airing it again in August and December of that year. Then after that, there's just a very small handful of reruns of the special from 1976 up until February of 1978. Thanks to an interview Frank Oz did in March of 1975, we have quite a bit of information about it. Now, this was an interview done with the San Francisco Examiner, because the Jean Marsh Grover Monster cartoon special was actually filmed in San Francisco. A bit odd considering that Sesame Street has always been filmed in New York. Perhaps it was just where Jean Marsh was located at the time, or it was the easiest thing for the two of them, I'm not entirely sure. Now, Jean Marsh was featured because she starred in the series Upstairs, Downstairs, featured on PBS's Masterpiece Theater. You may know it better from the Sesame Street parody on Monsterpiece Theater, where Grover runs up and down a bunch of stairs. Upstairs, Downstairs originally aired on ITV over in England, but it was very popular here in the States on PBS, so that's why Jean Marsh was included here. Remember, this was a PBS fundraiser, so they brought in somebody from a very popular adult series in Jean Marsh, and someone from a very popular children's series in the form of Grover. Grover and Marsh's segments for the special were filmed over the course of only 6 hours on one day in February of 1975, about a month before the special aired for the first time. Grover and Marsh's segments here were written by Jim Thurman and Norman Stiles, two of Sesame Street's main writers. And one of the producers, David Connell, was also a producer on Sesame Street, so a lot of the show's staff was involved here. According to the interview, Oz and Marsh would do a lot of ad-libbing during the downtime filming, making a lot of adult jokes that Frank Oz wanted to ensure wouldn't make the final cut. As the interview says, having definite ideas about the distinct personalities and characteristics of his Muppets and not wanting those images destroyed, Oz had to be reassured by the producer that the blue lines would be erased and wouldn't accidentally slip into the final show. Quote, "The child places a lot of trust in you, and you should never betray that trust," he explains. In what I could only call an incredible case of irony, we have some of these jokes saved, thanks to a later newspaper interview with Tulsa World. So, while we know nothing of what's in the footage of Grover and Marsh and the jokes that actually made the cut, we actually have a few of the adult jokes that had to be cut from the show. And now I will read you the dirty jokes they had to cut, using my terrible Grover impression. If I married a monster, would I have a monster baby?
I hope so.
I hope so too. She pats Grover and chides him for not taking a bath. Then she gives him a massage. Grover enjoys this. I can see you're very tactile. I can do something you can't do. She taps her nose and her tongue pops out. She pulls on her throat and her tongue darks back.
I know something you can't do,
Grover says. What's that?
Stick a wire in your arm.
Also mentioned in this article is a, quote, wacky Lewis Carroll-like nonsense rhyme that Jim Thurman came up with on the spot when they needed an additional joke, prompting Frank Oz to ask, "Where the hell did you get this, Jim?" According to the article, producer Dave Connell thinks it'll work and that they'll use it. If this nonsense rhyme did make the final cut, it would be the only line we have any information about from these wraparound segments. The article then goes on to say that Oz and Marsh, after filming their segments, filmed 3 different advertisements for the special. A 20-second one, a 30-second one, and a 60-second one. All 3 of which were completely improvised, and all 3 of which are also completely lost. The special seems to also have been advertised on a KCET pledge drive. KCET is a secondary PBS station located in Los Angeles, and during a pledge drive they held, you could see an image in the background of Grover and Marsh together, this being the only color image that we have from this special. I'm not sure if the pledge drive featured any sort of information on the special. I couldn't find any sort of video of it, but I would assume it's just there in the background advertising, one of the things on PBS. Now that we have the background information, when this aired, when it was filmed, who wrote it, and whether or not Jean would have a monster baby if she married a monster, let's get into what was actually in the special that aired. As I previously said, this was a 60-minute special that showcased some of the best animated segments from Sesame Street and the Electric Company. Marsh and Grover hosted, introducing the special and then appearing between each animated segment to introduce the next one. According to one of the interviews with Frank Oz, these wraparound segments only made up approximately 12 minutes of the 1-hour special. That leaves approximately 32 to 48 minutes of animated segments, depending on whether or not this aired with commercials, or whether or not there was an intro or credits, etc. Now, luckily, the animated segments featured here, as far as we know, are not lost. because they were all segments that were featured on Sesame Street and the Electric Company. The problem is, we don't have a full list of which animated segments were featured. In fact, we only definitively know of one, The King of Eight, mentioned directly in a review written by a woman named Sandy Hafner for the Buffalo News on March 22, 1975. Quote, "I wonder how many big people were really watching. Those who weren't missed the story of The King of Eight. The King of Eight is a very famous stop-motion animated early Sesame Street segment. It's no wonder this one made it in. This is one of the most beloved Sesame Street sketches of all time. Now, as great as The King of Eight is, it's only 1 minute and 10 seconds long, so what about the rest of the special? Well, we could put together 2 more likely candidates thanks to a newspaper article written in the Examiner to promote the special, which reveals that one of the segments featured was created by Chuck Jones, the legendary Looney Tunes animator. Jones produced 5 Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner shorts for the Electric Company, made to teach reading. And the Examiner article reveals that one of these Roadrunner cartoons was the one featured. But which one? There were 5. While a print ad from the Miami Herald reveals a picture of Wile E. Coyote from the Electric Company Skip cartoon. We don't have confirmation that this was the Roadrunner cartoon featured. They could have just used a picture from any of the Electric Company Roadrunner segments and put it here, but considering the image above it is a picture of Grover and Marsh that I haven't seen released anywhere else, it seems pretty likely that yes, this is a screen cap from the actual special, and Skip was the cartoon played. The Examiner also lists a monster cartoon created by children's author Maurice Sendak, creator of Where the Wild Things Are. This brings us back to Sesame Street, where he made 2 rather infamous sketches, Bumble Artie and Monster Number 7. Since it says a monster cartoon specifically, I think it's safe to assume that Monster Number 7 was the one featured here. A cartoon about 7 monsters having a race and the wacky and pretty disturbing ways they try to win. Monster Number 7 first aired on the show in 1971. But Sesame Workshop received several complaints that it was too scary and it was terrifying children. After doing some testing and showing it to kids in daycare, they confirmed, yeah, it was too scary and pulled it from the show. And honestly, I don't blame them. Something about this still makes me really uncomfortable now. The same fate, for the record, also befell Bumble Artie. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because, as Kidman reports, the final Sesame Street episode to feature Monster Number 7 was episode 737, which first aired on February 11th, 1975, the exact same month that the cartoon special was filmed. That makes this lost special the final piece of Sesame Street media to contain Monster Number 7. Unless, of course, they actually aired Bumble Artie, but the article says monster cartoon, and Bumble Artie was about a bunch of pigs. Monster Number 7, despite being banned from the show and a part of this lost special, is still out there, as you can clearly see from the fact that I've been using footage for it throughout this part of the video. But it also lives on in the form of a book, which was later adapted into a kids show in the early 2000s, with sort of toned-down designs for these guys. Okay, we now know of 3 sketches that were very likely in the special, but from here on out, things get nearly impossible to narrow down. We are now out of articles, interviews, and advertisements to check for hints about what other cartoons are here. The only source we have left is the rest of Sandy Hafner's review. In addition to confirming the King of Eight's inclusion here, Hafner also alluded, albeit vaguely, to some of the other sketches included in the special. Hafner mentions that the special included some imaginative counting to 20, the letter H, the function of oo, and some phonetic reading, all done cartoon style. With just how many animated segments Sesame Street made, even up to 1975, it is nearly impossible to narrow down specifically what segments Hafner is referring to. It's even more impossible because we don't know which of these segments were from Sesame Street and which of them were from the Electric Company. All we know are these four things: imaginative counting to 20, the letter H, the function of OO, and phonetic reading. I don't even know where to begin to break all this stuff down. In fact, not even Kingman's article, which has been so insanely useful throughout the entire development of this video, breaks down what these sketches could be, because again, it's just that hard to narrow down. I also don't really know all that much about Electric Company, at least compared to Sesame Street, so I'm not really sure what would be an Electric Company segment of the four. Regardless, I want to very briefly speculate what segments I think these four might be. Again, everything I say right now is just going to be speculation based on what Hafner gave us. This is what I think these likely are. So, imaginative counting to 20. I think it's very likely that this is a Sesame Street segment, and the one that immediately came to my mind is this one, Guru Counts to 20, which I think is easily the most famous animated Sesame Street segment about counting to 20. Not only was it famous, I remember this being in the show all the time in episodes that I used to watch, it was in reruns on the show for decades, for the record. But not only is it famous, it also fits our criteria. It aired before 1975, first appearing on the show in 1971, and, just like Hafner says, it features some very imaginative counting to 20. There are some very creative visuals in this segment. So I think this is pretty likely what she's referring to, but again, just speculation. I also think it's pretty safe to assume that the phonetic segment mentioned comes from Electric Company. Electric Company was designed to teach kids who sort of graduated from Sesame Street. It was kind of like the next level up. And so they would often focus on basic reading comprehension skills and phonics. One of their most famous segments, of course, features phonetics being sounded out, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of those made it in. In fact, there's even one about the OO sound, which would kill two birds with one stone. It's just a matter of whether or not these would be considered animated. The people talking are just shadows of real people, but the letters are animated, so I don't really know whether or not this would qualify for the special. This version from Family Guy is fully animated, though.
At fat. Oh, that's it, buddy.
Regardless of if it is one of these sounding out sketches or not, I think it's still safe to assume that the phonetic and OO sound sketches come from Electric Company. I just have no clue what the two of them would be. And finally, the letter H. Easily the hardest one to narrow down, because all we know about it is that it's about the letter H. There are countless options for what this could be. Luckily, this is the one segment that Kingman has speculated on. The Muppet Wiki says that one of the segments in the special was made by a man named John Hubley, listing his name right alongside Sendak. While there isn't a source to this, the Muppet Wiki rarely ever gets anything wrong, so we'll take their word for it for now. There's just one problem. John and his wife Faith Hubley made over 30 segments for Sesame Street before moving to make segments for the Electric Company. Hubley's contribution could be anything, but as Kingman points out, he does have a segment about the letter H that aired before 1975. So, could this be our letter H sketch, as Kingman speculates? Well, it's possible, but the Hubleys made so many cartoons, and there are so many cartoons about the letter H, I think the odds are just pretty low. We also barely know anything about this special, so I think it would be a pretty big surprise if one of the few segments we know is in it is connected to one of the few other segments we know is in it. But hey, stuff like that happens in lost media searches all the time. And speaking of lost media searches, there is one final sketch speculated to be in the special. None other than Cracks. This is the most famous Lost Sesame Street segment of all time. One that took years for people to find, just piecing together old childhood memories of a disturbing character called the Crack Monster. Cracks is now found media, but the Lost Media Wiki lists that it's speculated to have been included in the Grover Monster Gene Marsh special. Now this doesn't seem impossible, but when I first read it, it felt very unlikely. People were searching for cracks for years, trying to figure out where they saw it, so it's no surprise that some connected it to another piece of lost media, speculating that perhaps it was included here. There's just one problem. Now that Cracks has been found, we know its first appearance was in Sesame Street episode 818, which first aired in December of 1975, months after the Grover Monster cartoon special did. So, no, Cracks was not included here. And with that, we come to the end of our video. That is all the information out there about the Gene Marsh Grover Monster cartoon special. Of course, before we wrap this video up, I have to give a massive shout out to this article from Angus Kidman. This video would be absolutely impossible to make if it were not for this article, which so perfectly retold this story. Really helped me out here. But now is the part where I have to turn it over to all of you. If anyone watching this video has any information on this special, including any memories of it or potential leads to find the footage, please leave it down in the comments. Finding this special may be a long shot, but any new information is, of course, always very welcomed. And if Sesame Street Lost Media has taught me one thing, there can be some pretty crazy findings in lost media cases. Things that you think are gone forever may very well not be. Maybe one day we'll see the Gene Marsh Grover Monster cartoon special in its entirety. Anyway guys, thank you all so much for watching this video. Please consider subscribing if you're interested in Muppet pop culture history, and I will see you guys next time. Bye now.
He's so dumb, he's trying to eat a hot dog with no mouth.
That does it!